Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very, very much for dialing into our webinar this afternoon. So, first of all, very, very quick introduction of myself. I'm Tiffanie, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Naluri. Prior to this, I spent some time in management consulting and also in academia, where I completed my PhD in cognitive, perceptual, and brain sciences. So as a cognitive psychologist, I was very fascinated by how social factors influence the way that we perceive ourselves, our environment, and also those around us. I looked at things like how our sense of belonging influenced our ability to pick up on subtle emotional cues from people, and how our fear of rejection impacted the way that we form relationships with others. Now, 10 years on, and after multiple different career changes, I actually find myself back at where I started, investigating a very similar topic. But now, instead of just focusing on how our internal factors influence how we perform in social situations, especially after my time as a management consultant, I have developed a very keen interest in also looking at how these exact same factors influence workplace performance. Well, I think we can all agree that, there is no doubt that COVID-19 has left and continues to leave some very devastating impacts. The one silver lining is that it has accelerated the pace and the openness for conversations around the importance of mental well-being, motivation, communication, and above all, it has highlighted our innate ability to adapt. So questions like, how do I juggle work-life balance? Or how can I communicate better with my peers and my bosses? And how can I remain productive in this new normal? So for the next 40 minutes or so, I hope to share a bit of my own personal perspectives on productivity and performance. And I wanted to start by asking you to take the next maybe 30 seconds or so to think about, and when I say think about, really imagine in your minds, how does a productive day look like for you? When you imagine how does a productive day look like for you, is it a day where you did a lot? Or was it a day where you learned something new? Or was it a day where you did something well? Now, chances are, while all those three scenarios may be somewhat familiar, when you took that 30 seconds or so to imagine your most productive day, the first memory that popped up in your mind is slightly skewed towards one scenario versus the others. And while I do want to say, and I typically try to say this, there are no right or wrong answers. In this case, unfortunately, there is a wrong answer. And I say this as I reflect on my own definition of how a productive day looks like for me. Now, here's a short story, a short personal story. In late August last year, after over 22 hours of excruciating pain, I gave birth to the cutest little baby girl at 2.77 kgs. Okay, now, stuff happened at the hospital. I think I had a day to recover, and then I went back home. And post that, I did as I was advised by many. I did a month of what is more common in Asian cultures, confinement, which, as I understood, was meant for new mothers to rest and recuperate. And while I think I did do my fair share of resting during that month, and of course I went through a very steep learning curve of all things relating to caring for a newborn, which I learned is not the same as caring for a puppy, I was filled with a deep, deep sense of anxiety every morning when I woke up, as the first thing that snapped into my mind is, what am I going to do today? What am I going to achieve today? And it was almost as though my mind that was supposed to be resting was in fact not resting at all. Because I just kept thinking about what can I do to feed my obsession of doing a lot on a daily basis. I have reached a point where I equated doing a lot as being productive. And it was almost like this addiction and the fact that I wasn't doing very much because I was meant to be resting and recuperating, that made me feel like I was being unproductive. Now, 5 months on since then, I'm glad to share that I think I am getting a bit better. I think I'm slowly learning to see the light. And I've realized now that being productive does not necessarily mean doing things every single minute of every day. Because if we look at the definition of productivity, productivity is defined at the rate at which we do useful work. The key word here being useful. And if we zoom in further into the definition of productivity and look specifically at workplace productivity, it is in fact the efficiency in which goals are being completed. Now, nothing in those definitions says anything about being busy, and yet being busy has somehow become a badge of honor for many of us. And there is this prevailing notion that if you aren't super busy, you are either not important or you're lazy or you're not hardworking. Right? You hear people complaining all the time about, oh, I'm so busy, I missed my meal, or I'm so busy, I had to sacrifice my sleep or my personal time. But all those overcommitments are actually not that impressive, and it's really nothing to shout about. Because there is a difference between busyness and productivity. Busy paints this picture of people who are constantly keeping themselves occupied or people who don't have enough time to do other things, whereas being productive describes an environment that is filled with goals, personal and or professional achievements, and success. Being in a productive environment means that you are in a place where you are actually learning or creating something meaningful versus just doing stuff. Because the truth is, busyness makes us less productive. Now, there has been quite a number of studies now that have shown that switching what you're doing mid-task actually increases the time it takes for you to finish both tasks by up to 25%. Microsoft also tried to investigate this exact phenomenon with their own employees and found that every time an employee was interrupted by an email or a phone call or the 10,000 other ways we get messages today, these exact same employees took an average of 15 minutes to get back to what they were doing. And this is because that slight interruption of an email coming in actually led them to stray to other activities, be it scrolling through social media pages or even browsing the web. Because every time we switch to a different task, our brain has to refocus very intently before it gets back in the flow. And that effort to refocus, especially when we try to and sometimes fail, leads to this buildup of stress, which then maybe some of you might have experienced it, then leads to burnout. So in other words, this constant switching of gears is in fact making us less able to cope with the stressors of our daily lives. But we as a society, myself included, remain obsessed with multitasking, that we think that we're getting more done, even if science is telling us that our brains are simply incapable of that. Regardless of how we might feel, please do remember that if we want to be at our most productive, we need to make a very conscious effort in managing our schedules enough to ensure that we can focus effectively on the task at hand, one at a time. It is a common belief that we would be happy if we could stay idle. But a recent study now has found the opposite. People are, in fact, a lot happier when they are engaged in activities versus doing nothing. All of us, like all we need is just some reason to be busy. And I think, again, many of you would probably share the similar experience where we would go mad if we had to be stuck in traffic for an hour, or if we were stuck at home without power, or what's worse, without internet connectivity. Any form of downtime, more often than not, immediately ruins our mood or our enthusiasm to complete tasks that we had in mind. In fact, this finding has been so prevalent that some of the biggest companies have started to capitalize on it. To give you an example, just think about the last time you ordered Grab food or the last time you used Grab to order a ride. Before Grab or Uber came along, hiring a ride was all about booking a cab and then, sitting down, waiting for the cab to show up to pick us up. Right? This waiting time could last somewhere between 5 minutes to 30 minutes. And what could we do then? All we could do was just sit down, wait, and be patient, and hopefully the ride would come ASAP. What Uber and then what Grab then subsequently followed on started doing was a revolutionary one. It was a revolutionary one. They introduced a gamified view to show us where the ride is. How is it approaching us with an expected time of arrival? Now, it seems quite simple, right? And I think many would not even remember a time before this existed. But that simple change in providing us with that gamified view of our ride and map allowed people to get over the boredom of waiting. Because now we can watch on our phones, where is the driver? When is he approaching? And in the meantime, I can get busy doing more stuff, right? I could get coffee while waiting. I could reply 2 more emails while waiting. But in other words, we now can all find something to keep us occupied. And we like that. In fact, some researchers from University of Chicago now have shown that this belief that busyness is a sign of success and hard work is so prevalent that we have reached a point that we fear inactivity. Now, a recent study that was done there now has coined this term idleness aversion to describe how people are drawn to being busy, regardless of how busyness harms their productivity. What is even more interesting is the finding that we sometimes are using this busyness to hide from our own fear of failure. We burn valuable time doing things that are sometimes not necessary or not that important because this busyness makes us feel productive. It protects us. For instance, responding to that non-urgent email or that non-urgent errand when you know you have a big project with a tight timeline that you need to finish. Now, I know it's tough, but we need to recognize when we are using these trivial activities to procrastinate or even to shield ourselves from the fear of doing something that is outside of our comfort zone. Yet one of the greatest irony of all this is, what is the first thing that we blame when we can't focus? We blame all these trivial activities. We blame the fact that we have emails and chat messages that are blowing up our screens. We blame distractions and interruptions that won't leave us alone. All these are valid reasons, but it's so critical for us to address the deeper and more fundamental root cause of poor productivity, which is sometimes our own fear of failure or self-efficacy. Now, self-efficacy is a psychological concept that refers to your confidence in successfully navigating a situation and overcoming potential obstacles that comes with it. In other words, how much do you believe when faced with a challenge or an unexpected change, you can successfully work through it? Now, with low self-efficacy, you are a lot more vulnerable to looking for distractions or self-interruptions. When you feel you won't be successful or can't work through problems, you will in fact go out of your way to find something else to do. But if you have high self-efficacy, and to remind you, high self-efficacy would mean that you have confidence that you will be able to work through the task or whatever that you're working on, you will automatically avoid the bulk of your daily distractions. And this then helps you focus more deeply and for longer periods of time. Research has also shown that this level of high self-efficacy fosters intrinsic interest and deep engrossment in activities, which then in turn leads to what we call a state of flow or a state of intensive focus, which has been shown to help us be up to 500% more productive. Another piece of work that I have personally found incredibly useful is that of Doug Newberg. And what he did in the early 2000s was he interviewed hundreds of world-class performers, including athletes, business leaders, artists, and also surgeons, to find out what made them tick or what made them successful at what they were doing. And a consistent pattern emerged from their stories. And with that, he coined it as the resonance performance model. I know it's a mouthful, but here is what it means. Now, as you would expect, these high performers spoke about their goals, how much time they put into practice and preparation. But what truly distinguished them compared to low performance was their drive. What distinguished their drive or what distinguished them from low performance was this deep sense of what it felt like to be at their best. So according to their description, a peak experience is one of wholeness and effortless fulfillment. And they were willing to work incredibly, incredibly hard to feel that way again. And they used that feeling or that peak experience as a centerpiece of what they do in their day-to-day. And Newberg calls that feeling, which each person defined uniquely, as the dream. Now, this dream was absolutely critical in maintaining motivation and in overcoming serious obstacles and setbacks, which then fuels this upward spiral of performance. Now, it's important here to note that it is the feeling that they were striving for, not a specific environment or a set condition, because all those things and our environment or the conditions that we are put in are things that we have no control over. How we feel about our success, though, is something that we are much more in control over. In other words, the resonance performance model highlights that high performance is essentially this ongoing cyclical process where first you need to define the dream by exploring how you want to feel and what conditions, people, and experiences enhances versus drains your energy. This dream then should be used as an anchor to help you define your goals. Then, of course, you do need to prepare by putting in the hard work, right? And this includes practice and training and putting in the time. But inevitably, you will also need to overcome challenges, be it external, right, such as injuries or rejection from others, or internal, be it your fear of failure or your anxiety about your performance. But in that phase of adversity, high performers carefully manage their energy and motivation levels by revisiting that dream. Top performers report that reconnecting to how they want to feel should they achieve their dream allows them to surpass obstacles, re-energize, and re-engage in preparation or in simply doing the necessary work. So if we were to put those two concepts that I've just mentioned together, right? On the one hand, now I've talked about the need for us to develop our sense of self-efficacy, right? Which is our confidence and our ability to successfully navigate a difficult or a new situation. And on the other hand, now I've also talked about the need for us to have this dream that is anchored on a deep sense of how does it feel like to be at our best? So how do we navigate or manage both? Firstly, we need to learn how to celebrate small wins. The more we complete small yet new tasks, the more confident you will become in that area. That is the very premise of any video game, right? Most games start with a series of very simple levels or tasks that are designed to show you how to play. And those small wins then snowball into kind of greater confidence in your ability and more fun as you work through the more difficult challenges. But this does take deliberate planning and practice of breaking down big tasks into smaller chunks so that you can work on it in your own way and you can persevere through. Secondly, it is important to also find your role models. Seeing other people succeed through hard work increases your own belief that you can do the same. And this is especially true when the people you're observing are like you. Because role models and mentors, they do a lot more than just show you show you that what you want is possible. Because by observing them in action, you learn how to react to the demands of the task, and you pick up skills and strategies that would otherwise take you years and years to learn on your own through trial and error. Now, of course, I also recognize that, observing mentors or role models may be something that is harder at a time like this, especially when a lot of us may be working remotely. So another source to look for role models or mentors is simply to search online. Read the stories about how others similar to you have worked hard and succeeded. Because now finding these commonalities between their struggles and yours will help you gain this sense of positive belief about your own abilities. Thirdly, get feedback. Simply hearing that you are doing a good job while you're in the midst of a difficult project can help convince you that you do indeed have the skills to succeed. For example, just think about the last time when one of your managers or even your peers told you that you are on the right track during a one-on-one for your latest project. How did that feel? I can bet that it probably felt quite good, and it probably fueled you to continue persevering through. And therefore, it is key that you create more opportunities for feedback earlier on in projects. And one of the methods that I like to use is this 30-90 method, where you ask for high-level feedback at 30% completion, and then the more tactical, specific feedback when you are facing the very last 10%. This helps avoid getting the wrong kind of feedback earlier on when you are still, only kind of with the skeleton of your work, which can then kill your belief that you can power through. Now, finally, to wrap up before we go into question and answer, because I saw that there were many questions that come in, so I wanted to take the time to kind of go through them in detail. I wanted to share this quote in the movie Interstellar by Christopher Nolan. Not sure how many of you have watched it. But essentially, the old scientist was asked, who is your greatest enemy? And what are you most afraid of? And to that, he answered, I am most afraid of time. And I'm sure most, if not all of you on the call today, you must have either read articles or listened to talks or podcasts on boosting your productivity. And I'm also willing to bet that we have thought that this person who is going to implement all these productivity hacks in our lives is this person that we are going to be tomorrow, right? But tomorrow, this fictional, magical place where 99% of our best attempts at being productive, where, all that best attempts is supposed to happen. When it actually comes, it's actually just the now again. It's the present moment. So this tomorrow version of ourselves, right? I'm going to wake up early tomorrow to go to the gym, or I'm going to fix my squeaky work chair tomorrow, or I'm going to revert to my colleague on that outstanding matter tomorrow. When that tomorrow moment comes, more often than not, we are just the same person at the very same spot again. We have fallen into this trap that we need more and more information to solve this struggle, to be more productive or to be on top of things. Let's learn more about how we can change, right? But the reason why I call it a trap is because we know what we need to do. And as much as I would love to think that this webinar was groundbreaking for you, I have a sense that most of you would have heard in some shape or form at least some of the tips that I've shared today. So at some point, we need to just own up that it's really just you against you. And with that, I want to challenge each and every one of you today on the call to just start today, right? Pick up a task that you have been procrastinating on. And number one, think about how you would feel once you have completed it. Number two, ensure that you have broken it up into something that is achievable by today. Number three, block out undisturbed time in your calendar so that you can focus. And number four, simply complete it. I know that I have done my fair share of that simply by sharing my thoughts with you about productivity today. Thank you very much.